All right, so today we're going on a deep dive into the work of a philosopher named Samuel Clarke. We're going to be tackling metaphysics, ethics, even some Newtonian physics. It should be a really interesting one, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one.
Yeah.
Clarke is kind of a bit of a hidden gem
Okay.
in the history of philosophy, but his impact was huge. He lived from 1675 to 1729,
Okay.
right between John Locke and George Berkeley,
Oh, wow.
two absolute giants.
Wow, so right in the thick of it. So it sounds like he was in the middle of this, like,
Yeah.
just incredible explosion of thought and ideas. But he wasn't just like an ivory tower philosopher, was he?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Clarke was very involved in defending both natural and revealed religion.
Okay.
He was even chaplain to Queen Anne for a time.
Wow.
But here's a fun fact for you. Clarke was the author of the standard physics textbook,
Wow.
used in England and the American colonies for decades.
The standard physics textbook.
Yes,
Really? I would not have pegged a theologian for a physics textbook writer.
I know. It's surprising.
So what was it about physics that drew him in?
Well, Clarke was a huge champion of Sir Isaac Newton's work.
Okay.
He saw in Newtonian physics a reflection of a powerful and active God, a universe governed by laws and order, not chaos and randomness.
Okay, so we're talking about a universe where, the planets don't just randomly spin off into the void.
Right.
Yeah, and atoms don't just decide to like dissolve on a whim.
Exactly.
I can see how that would appeal to someone who is deeply invested in the idea of divine order.
Exactly. So for Clarke, Newtonian physics provided a framework for understanding the universe
Okay.
as a manifestation of God's design and ongoing activity.
So God's not just setting things up and then walking away.
Right.
Okay.
And this is where his concept of anti-naturalism comes in.
Hmm.
He believed that matter itself was passive,
Okay.
incapable of moving or even existing on its own. It needed this constant input, of divine energy, if you will.
So
Yeah.
So if I'm following you correctly, Clarke believed that without God actively holding everything together, the universe would basically just
It would just fall apart.
disintegrate. Yeah, it would just disappear.
Exactly. For Clarke, God wasn't this watchmaker who set the universe in motion and then stepped back.
Okay.
He was constantly involved, ensuring this stability and coherence of the cosmos.
So this leads us to one of his most famous arguments.
Yes.
His attempt to prove the existence of God.
Through pure reason.
The a priori argument.
Yes.
So for those of us who aren't philosophy experts, maybe could you break that down a little bit?
Sure.
We're talking about proving something using logic alone.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Clarke starts with this very simple observation. Something exists.
Okay.
Right. We exist, the world exists, the universe exists.
Sure.
From this, he argues that something must have always existed
Okay.
because you can't get something from nothing.
Makes sense. So
Mhm.
how do we get from something has always existed to that something is God?
Right. That's where this principle of sufficient reason, or PSR, comes in.
Okay.
This principle essentially states that everything that exists must have a reason
Oh.
or explanation for its existence.
Okay.
Clarke argued that a being with the attributes that we associate with God, independence, eternity, necessity,
Okay.
is the only sufficient explanation for the existence of the universe.
Okay. So in a sense, Clarke is saying our very existence points towards something much bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Something that has always been and always will be.
Exactly.
It's a dizzying thought.
Yes, it is.
But I'm curious about this idea of like a necessary being and how that connects to his understanding of space and time.
Right.
Were those just like abstract concepts to him?
Right.
Or did they have this like deeper meaning that's tied to his beliefs about God?
That is a great question. And it leads us to one of the most fascinating and admittedly challenging parts of Clarke's philosophy.
Right.
He didn't just see space and time as like background elements. He saw them as like fundamental realities.
Yeah.
And their existence was directly dependent on God.
Oh, okay. So we're going to need to unpack that, I think.
Yes, we will.
Because it's hard to imagine space and time as existing without the stuff that fills it.
Right. So for Clarke, space and time weren't just like the stage upon which the cosmic drama unfolded, They were like these fundamental aspects of reality, like attributes of God, if you will.
Okay.
And this meant that they existed independently of any objects or events within them.
Okay. I'm going to need you to unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
Because it's hard to imagine space and time as existing without the stuff that fills them up. So how did he justify that? How did Clarke justify that idea?
Well, he argued that space and time are necessary preconditions for the universe to make sense.
Okay.
Like, imagine trying to describe the location of an object without any reference to space or the occurrence of an event without any reference to time. It becomes impossible.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like, yeah, it's like trying to describe a dance
Right.
without mentioning the stage or the rhythm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So if space and time are these like fundamental realities,
Right.
how did Clarke reconcile that with God's omnipresence?
Right.
Like if God is everywhere, does that mean that God is like inside space and time?
Well, that's where Clarke breaks from traditional theological views.
Okay.
He rejects this idea of God existing outside of space and time,
There.
as if they were some sort of separate container.
Yeah.
Instead, he argued that God is substantially present in all of space and time.
Okay.
Remember, for Clarke, matter is passive and it can't move itself.
Right.
And so God's constant presence is essential for the universe's continued existence.
So we're not talking about a distant God who created the universe and then stepped back to kind of observe.
Yeah.
Clarke's God is intimately involved, constantly sustaining, upholding the very fabric of reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so this leads kind of to a question about miracles then.
Right.
Were they just God tinkering with the cosmic machinery?
Yep.
Or did they have like a deeper significance?
Well, Clarke's view of miracles is directly tied to his understanding of God's continuous activity in the universe.
Okay.
He saw miracles as events that deviate from the usual course of nature, but here's the crucial point. He believed they were only miraculous from our, limited human perspective.
Hold on, are you saying that miracles weren't actually supernatural?
Well, in a sense, yes.
That sounds a bit radical, even for Clarke.
Well, Clarke believed that God's wisdom and goodness are unchanging.
Okay.
So any seemingly unusual intervention is simply part of God's eternal plan.
Okay.
A plan that we, with our finite minds, can't fully comprehend.
So it's like watching a master chess player. A move might seem really strange to us, but it's all part of a grand strategy that we don't fully grasp.
Exactly.
Didn't Clarke have this famous debate with Leibniz about this very topic?
He did, yes.
If I recall correctly, Leibniz had a very different view of miracles.
He did. Absolutely. The Clarke-Leibniz debate is a classic philosophical showdown.
Yeah.
Leibniz believed that God created a perfect, self-sufficient universe governed by immutable laws.
Okay.
He saw miracles as disruptions to this perfect order, almost like patches that God had to apply to, fix unforeseen problems.
So for Leibniz, a truly perfect God wouldn't need to perform miracles.
That's right.
It'd be like that master chess player who had planned every move flawlessly from the start.
Exactly.
And so there'd be no need for sudden changes in strategy.
Exactly. That difference in perspective was at the heart of their disagreement.
Okay.
Clarke, with his emphasis on God's active role, saw miracles as these demonstrations of God's power.
Okay.
And a way to communicate with humanity. Leibniz, on the other hand, saw them as imperfections in an otherwise perfect creation.
Okay, so it sounds like they weren't just debating the nature of miracles, but like the very nature of God's relationship to the universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this whole discussion has been mind-blowing. But I'm also curious to know about Clarke's ethical views.
Right.
He seemed very preoccupied with physics and metaphysics,
Yeah.
but did he give any thought to, how we should live our lives?
He did. Clarke's ethical theories were just as intricate and fascinating as his metaphysical ideas.
Okay.
His entire ethical system revolved around this concept of fitness,
Okay.
the inherent rightness or wrongness of certain actions.
So is he saying that just like there are laws of physics governing the material world,
Yes,
that there are like moral laws governing human behavior,
exactly.
and these moral laws are independent of God's will?
That's right. And get this. He believed these moral truths were eternal, necessary, and discoverable by human reason.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
It is.
So what did this idea of fitness actually mean, in practice? Can you give me a concrete example?
Sure. Think about borrowing something from a friend.
Okay.
Returning it is the fit thing to do, right?
Right.
It's a matter of equity and fairness, which were central ideas in Clarke's ethics.
Okay.
He believed we have a moral obligation to act in accordance with these inherent fit relationships,
Okay.
regardless of rewards or punishments.
I'm starting to see how this connects to his overall philosophy.
Right.
He's applying that same rigorous logic and reasoning
Right.
to the realm of ethics. arguing that there are these objective moral truths
Exactly.
that we can discover through, like, rational inquiry.
Precisely. Clarke was a true champion of reason. He believed it was our most powerful tool for understanding both the universe and our place within it.
Okay.
But this commitment to reason also got him into trouble,
Uh-oh.
especially when it came to his views on the Trinity,
Okay.
a core doctrine in Christian theology.
Oh, this should be interesting. What does Clarke have to say about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit?
Well,
I have a feeling it wasn't your standard, Sunday school interpretation.
you could say that. His take on the Trinity was quite complex
Okay.
and ultimately controversial. To simplify it a bit, he argued that while each member of the Trinity is a person,
Okay.
only God the Father is self-existent.
Okay.
He believed that God the Son derives his power and authority from God the Father.
So he's essentially suggesting a hierarchy
Right.
within the Trinity, with God the Father at the top.
Exactly.
That's definitely going to ruffle some feathers.
Oh, yeah.
Was this seen as heresy?
It sparked a huge debate,
Okay.
with some accusing him of denying the full divinity of Christ.
Wow.
And this controversy kind of overshadowed some of his other philosophical work
Okay.
and put him at odds with some powerful figures in the church.
It's fascinating how Clarke's commitment to reason and logic led him to challenge established doctrines, even in the realm of religion. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about his overall impact on philosophy.
Okay.
Did his ideas have, like, a lasting influence? Or were they mostly forgotten after his death?
Well, Clarke's influence was significant, particularly in England and Scotland.
Okay.
He was this key figure in popularizing Newtonian physics
Okay.
and interpreting its philosophical implications. His work laid the groundwork for many of the debates about science, reason, and religion that continued throughout the 18th century.
So he was kind of like this bridge between the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment.
Exactly.
He helped people grapple with the implications of these, new discoveries and new ideas and how they fit into this broader understanding of the universe.
Yes,
And our place within it.
that's a great way to put it, yeah. Clarke was grappling with these massive shifts in thinking, trying to reconcile this new scientific worldview with these traditional theological beliefs. And his influence wasn't limited to, physics and metaphysics. Remember, his concept of fitness and ethics, that had a lasting impact on moral philosophy as well. Thinkers like Richard Price and even David Hume engaged with Clarke's ideas, sparking these debates that continued for generations.
So even though, Clarke may not be a household name today, his fingerprints are kind of all over the history of Western thought.
Yeah.
He was wrestling with some of the most fundamental questions about existence. And those questions, they never really go away, do they?
No, they don't. And that's why Clarke is still relevant today, He reminds us that philosophy is an ongoing conversation,
Yeah.
a constant process of, questioning, exploring, and refining our understanding of, ourselves and the universe. He wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, whether it was in physics, metaphysics, or even theology.
I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yep.
We've explored Clarke's views on everything from, the nature of God to the foundations of morality. We even touched on his role in the scientific revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I've come away with a new appreciation for this often overlooked philosopher.
Me too. Clarke may not have all the answers, but he certainly knew how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And that, in itself, is a valuable legacy.
Well said. Before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about Clarke's concept of space and time as attributes of God.
Right.
If space and time are more than just, empty containers, if they're fundamental aspects of the divine, what does that tell us about the nature of reality? Does it change how we think about God's relationship to the universe and to humanity?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that continues to fascinate philosophers today. Does God exist, within space and time, as Clarke argued, or are those concepts themselves part of God's very being? If so, what does that mean for our understanding of, divine action, creation, and even our own existence? These are profound questions without easy answers.
It's mind-boggling, really. Clarke's philosophy pushes us to kind of expand our understanding of the universe and grapple with the truly mysterious aspects of existence.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts a philosopher can give us, the sense of wonder and a desire to keep exploring.
Well said. Samuel Clarke may not be a household name, but his ideas continue to resonate, reminding us that the pursuit of knowledge and understanding is a journey without end.
And on that note, I encourage our listeners to, continue their own explorations. Read Clarke's work, delve into the history of philosophy, and keep asking those big questions. You never know what insights you might discover.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Samuel Clarke. We hope you've enjoyed the journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep the philosophical conversation going.